Now the deadly situation in Egypt. New reports that almost 300 people have been killed as of today, including a veteran cameraman from our sister network, Sky News, out of England. Hundreds more were hurt after violent clashes between pro-Morsi protesters and the state security forces. As of right now, Egypt's interim vice president has resigned, and the interim president, Adli Mansour, has declared a month-long state of emergency. Plus, there are curfews which have been issued on more than 12 cities throughout the country. Needless to say, the drastic situation has our government, the U.S. government, reviewing the $1.3 billion in aid we provide to Egypt annually. We want to bring in Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, to help us understand exactly what's at stake here. And when we see this kind of violence in what had been, I don't want to say a democratic country because it had been a military dictatorship and then, under the previous presidents, but this can't be good in any way. Is there any silver lining to any of it?
Well, I think the silver lining would be there if they were getting some adult supervision from the leaders of the free world, like the president, who unfortunately is finding it more important to play golf and be on vacation, because, really what they need is a timeout. You see the same old evolution of the two strong horses, which is the secular fascists of the Egyptian military versus the Islamists. And the Islamists, since they were ousted, they didn't have a democracy. They were authoritarian in their processes, and the only thing democratic they did was get elected. And the military now has fed into, since they were taken out of power, they've stoked violence. They want to become victims. They want to become martyrs. So they've burned over 20 churches. They even recently destroyed a Christina youth center. And the military now, rather than respond with significant, calm, has actually stoked the violence more so and is on the edge of a civil war.
That's what's so troubling here. I mean, Egypt is the largest Arabic nation. It's got the largest population. You have so many different kinds of people who live there. You have Christian Coptics, you have Sunni Muslims, you have Shiite Muslims. The majority are not the radical Muslims that we see in the streets, or are they?
No, the majority. We saw the largest demonstrations in humanity, Adam, happened just a month ago when they ousted the Muslim Brotherhood. What 60 years of oppression and violence against the Brotherhood could not do, 1 year of them trying to run a democracy did, by virtue of having the people rise from 5 to 10 million in the streets. 30 million, almost half of the population, signed a plebiscite to have them removed. So ultimately, the people, mostly 90% are Muslim, don't want the Islamists, but they've not been able to thread that needle of democracy because they continue to get lost between the two fascisms of the military authoritarian rule of the Mubarak Arab military that we see now back to their violent ways, and the Brotherhood, which are really into putting into place an Islamic state and controlling through Sharia and theocracy.
I'm going to just bring this up in the form of our discussion for understanding, but would it make sense to continue U.S. aid because perhaps we could put influence on the military to transition to a democracy or a democratic government made up of that majority of people who are not radicalized?
Well, Adam, we have to put the aid into context. Remember, already most of our 2013 aid of the $1.5 billion has already been sent to Egypt. So recently the Senate panel looked at this and they were looking at 2014. If we're going to stay relevant, we have to say that we don't want to destabilize Egypt completely, but that is a leverage. But how big of the leverage is that? You remember Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the Emirates already have promised $12 billion to Egypt in the next year. The IMF has 4.8. They're looking at giving. We could leverage that. But our biggest point, Adam, is to help them build party politics, help them build institutions of democracy, and truly lead the free world. It's not just about economic aid.
How if you're the authority in Egypt now, the military government, and you've got the 30 million who are leery of you, but clearly prefer you to the violence you see in the street, how can you prevent this? Well, I'm looking at the screen right now, and I realize this might be the minority, but that's what's getting the attention of cameras across the world.
Well, the act of the vice president today, ElBaradei, of resigning, I think is an act of cowardice. We should be telling them to stay, the ones that are against the violence, that want to thread that needle through peaceful evolution into democracy, need to stay in power and put pressure on both sides of this violent equation that benefits both of them and say, you know, the people want peaceful transition, and start to say that this is not the way. Both sides need to time out and say that we are going to be bringing human rights groups in that now they turned away and reneged on saying that they were going to be transparent, and begin to put the pressure of the free world upon them right now, which they are not seeing, and we are becoming more and more irrelevant rather than being more relevant into their transition, and call upon the people like ElBaradei to stay there and say that we are going to push the military to be fair, but also push away the Islamists from driving sectarian violence and ripping apart Egypt in their sort of vision to control theocratically Egypt's future.
Zuhdi Jasser, we appreciate your being here as we watch what at one point was part of the cradle of civilization, now the cradle of unrest in the Middle East. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Thanks.